The Swedish International Development Corporation has been working with multidimensional poverty for a long time. But since we got the Agenda 2030 and the Sustainable Development Goals, the bar was raised higher. The agenda says that we should aim to eradicate poverty in all its forms everywhere, but it doesn't explicitly state what these dimensions are. So Sida took this challenge at heart and made a inclusive exercise of talking to our partners and colleagues and what we mean by multidimensional poverty. And even though the experience of poverty is very personal and varies by context, we ended up defining 4 different dimensions of poverty, or broad categories of poverty, that would help us structure our thoughts. So the first category, that is the basis of our definition, is resources. So according to Sida, a person who's living in poverty is resource poor, and poor also in other dimensions. And here we talk about your ability to provide for your family, ability to have a decent standard of living. So we're talking about your income, your assets, maybe you have a car to drive to work or a house to live in. But we also include immaterial assets like your skills in order to work, or your health. So that is a quite broad definition of resource base. But we also recognize that being poor is not, you're usually poor in resources, but that might not be where the problem lies. So why you don't have the income is possibly because of the other dimensions. So the second dimension that we focus on is opportunities and choice. That talks about your ability to build your resource base and use your resources productively. So if you have skills, you need access to productive jobs. You need access to the labor market. You also need access to basic infrastructure such as electricity and internet. You need access to healthcare if you get sick, and also a possibility to educate you further. So this is pretty much about the capability approach of becoming the best version of yourself, allowing people to grow. But just having the opportunity in theory might not work either, which brings us to the third dimension, which is power and voice. At the core, this is about your opportunity to influence your decisions that are important for your life. So it could be at home, the decision making between the spouses, who decides about the resources. It could be being able to participate in the decision making in your community or at the local election. It's quite a lot about discrimination. So your ability to get a job might be restricted if you belong to a Roma population and you're discriminated against on undue grounds, or females might be discriminated. So we're looking at people's ability to exercise their choices in a decent way. The fourth and final category that we think is important to understand why people are being left behind is human security. And here we talk about physical, sexual, and psychological violence, or threat of such violence that people are experiencing and that is holding them back. So for instance, if women are afraid to take the bus late in the evening, or if the parents are not willing to send their kids to school that are further away, they are limiting their choices and ability to build their resources. So our definition is being resource poor and poor in one or several of the other dimensions. And we think that the interplay between these dimensions is really the key to understand why people are still being left behind. We still, in this day and age, have almost 10% of the world's population in absolute poverty, and we have a lot of segments of the population that are being left behind. It's not a random sample of the population, and we need to understand what part of their life, what is the face of the poverty, and how does these different dimensions interlink to keep people in poverty in order to find pathways out of poverty.